Look, unless I'm moving in a parallel universe, everywhere I go, and I mean everywhere with a capital E, people are talking to me about Chinese ownership of prime agricultural land, of dairy farms, of buying houses, which purchasers are forcing up the price of houses for everybody else. And my mailbox full of these letters. Glenn, for example, on Friday wrote, "It's clear what the Chinese plan is. Buy the land, own it outright and indefinitely, lobby to bring in labour from China, sell the produce to themselves at a loss, like a transfer payment by Apple and Google. Not a cent in tax or any significant benefit other than the purchase price will flow to Australia." Glenn says there are some basic principles that should apply, and the first is reciprocal rights. No citizen or foreign-owned entity should be able to buy or own land or business in Australia unless Australian citizens or entities can do the same thing in that foreign country. There's a million of these letters. I mean, my mailbox is full of it. A woman from South Africa yesterday told me that they came to Australia for legitimate purposes. They wanted to set up a new world, a new life, a new business for their family. And the Foreign Investment Review Board went after them simply because they'd bought a house, another property, which was to be the business. And she said to me simply, they're pretty good at going after the low-hanging fruit, the Foreign Investment Review Board, but when it comes to millions of dollars being invested by others or used to purchase, they do nothing. Well, Kelly O'Dwyer has tabled her report into housing affordability. She's the Liberal member who succeeded Peter Costello in the federal seat, Victorian seat of Higgins. And this report was tabled in Parliament last week. She's on the line. Kelly, good morning.
Good morning, Alan.
How does what you are doing pick up on this concern that people are expressing about the ability of foreign interest to purchase Australian properties without any checks whatsoever?
Well, we, Alan, as you know, primarily focused on residential property because that was the terms of reference, but it does pick up on what you're talking about because one of our key recommendations was to establish a national register of land title transfers that records citizenship and residency of all purchasers of residential real estate. Now, when we have had discussions with the states and territories, because...
Sorry to interrupt you. So what about dairy farms?
Well, I was just about to come to that point, Alan, because when we've had these discussions with the states and territories, they've said to us they pretty much have a titles registry that doesn't discriminate. So it is my view that the register would more broadly incorporate all title transfers. That will be a question for the government to consider, but it would seem to me that is going to be the easiest way to implement this recommendation.
So I suppose I'm saying to you is, if there are barnacles out there are some things on which the government's got to get a wriggle on, and this is one of them. I mean, this was a key promise at the last election, this register. So, I mean, for example, you've already conceded, and that was an excellent inquiry that you conducted, but that foreign companies were breaking the law in relation to housing purchases. Now, it's against the law generally for foreign interests to buy established homes. Chinese buyers spent, your inquiry found, $5.9 billion on Australian established homes last year. It's distorted the market, no punishment.
Well, look... It wasn't quite $5.9 billion. That also included commercial real estate as well. But your point is right in that there was no court enforcement action since 2006 from the Foreign Investment Review Board, nor was there any divestment of illegally purchased property from 2007. Now, that was during the entire Rudd-Gillard-Rudd government. They did nothing. I think they lacked the political will to do something. And in fact, they did change the rules in 2008 very quietly just before Christmas to lift the requirement for temporary residents to even be screened by the Foreign Investment Review Board, which they then had to go back on in 2010. But after they'd changed the rules, a lot of people, I think, weren't aware that the rules had changed back.
Now, you've made recommendations. This is the other thing about the barnacles. You've made recommendations. One of the key ones is that civil penalties be applied for lawyers, accountants and real estate agents who help foreign buyers break the rules. You want increased fines on foreign buyers who break the law, and this is an excellent point, from a fine of $85,000 to a percentage of the value of the property they purchase. However, Kelly, they're recommendations. When are we going to see this as law?
Well, look, I think they're strong and common sense recommendations because we want to provide a disincentive for people doing the wrong thing, Alan. And you're right to say, we want to see these enacted as quickly as possible. The report has only just been tabled, and that was tabled on Thursday last week. The Treasurer has 6 months to respond to the report, but I think he'll respond a lot more quickly than that because, as I said, our 12 recommendations are common sense. They identify that there are problems within the Foreign Investment Review Board, that they do need to have additional resources to do their job properly, and that their internal processes need a huge shake-up. I mean, we were pretty critical of the fact that their court enforcement and legal divestments were nil since 2006, 2007.
Now listen, what little bureaucratic white ant found its way into the writing of this report to include this, which I couldn't believe, quote, foreign investment is not causing the market distortions that have been advocated in some quarters, particularly for first home buyers. Elsewhere, foreign buyers are vitally important to continuing the development of this sector. I mean, these comments don't pass the pub test. This is crap.
Well, let me explain.
They don't distort the market. You're kidding me.
Well, let me explain them, because when we talk about residential property, we're talking about different things depending on which aspect of the market we're looking at. And we received a huge amount of evidence, Alan, as you would understand. Some of it contradictory, and we had to make a judgment call on some of the evidence that was presented to us. The foreign investment that went into developing new units, new apartments, new homes was actually very good, because it increased the stock available for purchase and for rent. And a lot of that stock is being purchased by first home buyers, because they're getting into the market at the lower end of the market. So that's why that statement is there. But what we were critical of particularly is that in the established market, where you have limited supply and increased competition, there's clearly going to be a price effect, and that was borne out by evidence presented by the Reserve Bank of Australia.
Well, just coming back to the point, I take those points that you make. I mean, there is Australian money, of course, available to increase the housing pool and the housing market. It's held up by the kind of regulations that Josh Frydenberg's trying to deregulate. So I can name you now 10,000 home units that are on hold out here simply because of bureaucratic red tape in Macquarie Street.
Yeah,
so
and we found that too. You're absolutely right.
Give the Australians a bit of a go. But just coming back, and finally, civil penalties you recommend for lawyers, accountants and real estate agents who help foreign buyers break the rules. Will that see its way into legislation?
Yes, it's civil and criminal penalties.
A National Register of Land Title Transfers, that'll see its way?
Well, that's why we've made the recommendation.
Recording the residency status of foreign buyers?
That's why we've made the recommendation.
Increased fines on foreign buyers who break the rules, so that the fine is a percentage of the value of the property they purchased.
Well, I think that's a no-brainer.
No-brainer. But this is the point. I mean, when you're removing barnacles, these are big things for the public out there. Get it on the statute book in the next week.
Well, Alan, I've been doing my part there.
Well, you get a wriggle on, because we're not going to see you next year for a while.
Well, only in the middle of the year.
Won't be seeing you for a while.
Well,
Kay O'Dwyer and husband John are having a baby in May.
That's right, a budget baby.
All the best.
Thank you very much, Alan.
Thank you for your time. Kelly O'Dwyer.
The Alan Jones